to share with you my very first novel, The Great Thief, Dawn of a Guardian, with Candace Color Factory members. And I'm hoping you can see and hear me. So, this first novel, it starts off with a disappearance that reveals a conspiracy in the small town of Hartwell, Georgia. A universal warlord sets his sights on Earth and wishes to add it to his collection and grow his empire. Only the Guardian, bearer of the light, can stop him. So, without further ado, if you like what you've heard so far, please click the like button and please join me in the reading of the first chapter in my new novel. Thanks, guys. Okay. It was mid-June. The night air was humid and warm. Ember loved nights like this. She was riding through town in her family's beat-up Durango, watching people go by, and occasionally tuning into her family's conversation. She grew up here in the little town of Hartwell and loved it. The people, the community, an overall feel of small town living. Ember was one of 3 daughters of Lane and Ken Elkins, 2 social butterflies who had a heavy hand in their community through the church. Her parents were well known and liked in the town. Unlike Ember and her 2 sisters, though known well enough through their parentage, they strayed from most social events and preferred to spend their time brushing up on the latest issue of Vogue or window shopping at the mall 3 towns over. They had their own individual interests, but overall spent time with their family and helped on their grandparents' farm. Ember brushed back her light brown locks as her warm, honey eyes gazed out the window. Her own reflection could be seen, giving Ember time to scrutinize her own appearance. Her light ivory skin was a stark contrast to her siblings' tan skin. Ember had always taken more after her father, with a straight nose and high cheekbones, being the only connection she had to her maternal side. Her mother's tan skin, black cherry hair, and black eyes were the envy of most women. Ember's siblings reflected their mother's beauty, forcing Ember to see her own inadequacy. Though she knew herself to be pretty, she could not help but envy her mother's dark features. Ember watched as the small buildings of downtown Hartwell passed her by. She smiled as people she had known since she was small strolled the streets on their way to a late supper. Ember held her sketch pad tight as she sketched the lanterns already lit for the evening. She loved art and planned on going to college to be a graphics designer. Ember was abruptly brought from her musings as the sight of flashing blue lights beyond her own reflection in the glass window. At the far end of what looked to be the local Wally Mart parking lot, there was a large gathering of people. Their Durango came to a slow stop several rows over from the commotion. Ember and her sisters craned to see what was happening amongst the rubberneckers and police officers. Was there an accident? Ember's mom asked from somewhere behind her. Like a magnetic pull, her and her family were drawn into the chaos. Without thinking about the consequences, Ember climbed out of her vehicle to make her way over to the crowd. She was unaware of her family following close behind. The crowd had gathered around the garden center entrance, watching as the officers taped off the area. Like everyone else, Ember was curious as to what was going on. After much difficulty, the girl managed to fight her way through the crowd. Ember watched the scene completely mesmerized until she noticed a familiar face on the other side of the caution tape. A woman in her mid-30s was currently fighting back tears as an older officer spoke softly to her. Ember called out in shock at the realization of who this woman was. Aunt Mandy, Ember continued to call to her aunt, trying to get the woman's attention. The girl's aunt spun around to see her niece hanging over the tape waving at her. "Officers, she's my niece. Please let her through," her aunt called to the police officer, pushing the young girl back into the crowd. The girl leaped over the tape and ran to her aunt's side, ignoring the annoyed officer. Ember embraced her aunt tightly. It had been some time since she had seen Mandy. When Ember was young, she would play over at her aunt's house all the time. She looked up at the puffy pink face of her aunt. Mandy's eyes were pink, but still shined ice blue. Her hair was a little wet from her tears and glistened gold in the parking lot lamps. She had brown freckles all over her pink cheeks and looked to be in her mid-30s. "What's happening, Aunt Mandy?" the young girl asked. Her aunt tried to speak, but her voice failed her. "You are Miss Kinsley's niece. May I ask what your name is?" The sheriff regarded the young girl with sorrowful eyes. "Ember Elkins," she replied. "Well, Ember, my name is Sheriff Benson. I'm sorry to inform you that your cousin Cameron has been missing for the past hour." Mandy's tears flowed down her cheeks at a faster pace as her worst nightmare was vocalized. Cameron was Mandy's daughter and Ember's first cousin. Ember felt panic seep through her veins. Her world slowed as the news finally sunk in. What? For how long? If the sheriff heard, he showed no indication. He proceeded to speak with her aunt. Ember turned away as her mother took Ember's place at Mandy's side. She walked away from the commotion to where the building ended. She was deep in thought and shaking badly. The news of losing someone so close to her was too overwhelming. Ember forced herself to Ember forced herself to stop shaking while holding back tears that threatened to pour down her round face. Turning back towards the others, she wondered if they had any leads. The grown-ups were talking to the store manager and an elderly officer. "They have all my family asking questions right now. I'll know soon enough. I can't believe this is happening. Cameron was my best friend growing up. We used to play for hours at her house." Ember turned back towards the alleyway, watching the tall pines behind Wally Mart dance in the wind. She hugged her torso as the breeze carried a chill Ember had not noticed until right then. She took several deep breaths to calm down, deciding she had had enough time to relax. Ember made to rejoin her family when something caught her eye. Someone was coming up the alleyway between Wally Mart and the strip mall next door. It looked to be a man in his late 20s, passing by the mechanic's wing. He had slick back blonde hair and was wearing an expensive-looking tailored suit. She couldn't see what color his eyes were, for he was too far away. "What? What do you mean there's nothing on tape?" Ember's attention was drawn back to her mother, who was yelling at the manager. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the cameras only show your niece going into the store, not coming out. There was a technical glitch in the system that took us hours to repair. There is no feed from the hour your niece went missing, and now. Well, isn't that convenient? Did you ever stop to think the glitch was intentional?" Ember's big sister Pearl shouted. She was equally as irritated as their mother. Ember remembered the man and looked back to see if he was still there. A yelp escaped her gasping mouth as the man from the alley stood directly in front of her. He peered down with eyes so deep blue they looked nearly black in the shadow of the alley. "How do you do? My name is Gabriel Meeks." The man bowed slightly, alarming the teenage girl in front of him. "I'm sorry if I startled you, but I was wondering if you knew what was going on," the man asked, glancing at the officers. "Why is a man in a tailored suit in an alleyway late at night?" Ember asked herself curiously. She was not sure how to answer the man, but didn't want him to bother her family either. He looked like the type to either keep asking or stick around until he got some answers. Ember was a pretty good judge of character for the most part, but this man was hard to read. "A girl was abducted earlier, and the cops are trying to find out how it happened." Ember wasn't too worried about how much information she was giving out, though she did watch enough crime shows to know a kidnapper would sometimes come back to the scene of a crime. They usually wanted to find out how much the cops knew, right? So maybe he had something to do with Cameron's disappearance. "Abducted? Are you sure? Do you know who it was?" the man asked enthusiastically. He didn't seem to be concerned, only interested. "Yes, as a matter of fact. It was my cousin." Ember was insulted by the way he was behaving. Perhaps he's a reporter. A little investigation never hurts. Better to find out his motive. "Why were you in that alleyway?" she asked rather bluntly. She just had to make sure he wasn't a reporter. Then she would leave him alone. "I was about to inspect some property my employer has recently bought. That is until I saw the blue lights, so I decided to come investigate." The man pointed at the pine trees in the back of Wally Mart. Amber could understand him wanting to know what was going on. After all, she too shoved her way through the crowd for a better look at the scene. Though she still wasn't fully convinced, he seemed suspicious, and his alibi wasn't necessarily legit. "Are you going into the woods in your suit?" Amber asked, pointing at the older-style black suit with white pinstripes. "Yes. Unfortunately, my boss demanded I come straight over here from work, so I couldn't change first." Gabriel seemed annoyed by this last statement. A likely story, she thought to herself. "Hey, Ember." Ember's twin sister had come to join them. Emma had tan skin, gorgeous green eyes, and copper hair. She was skinnier than Ember, but made up for her lack of curve appeal with toned muscle. She briefly glanced at Gabriel, not bothering to ask who he was or why he was there. She had more pressing business. "Bad news. They don't have anything on camera, and they've searched the entire store. It's like she just disappeared." "Really?" Amber turned her attention away from the nosy businessman. "And if that wasn't enough, they can't list her as a missing person for at least 48 hours. In short, these guys aren't going to be much help." "That's horrible," Amber stated in outrage. "Yeah, looks to me like our small police force isn't going to be a lot of help. I might as well take over this case myself. Let the cops patrol the streets and waste their time. While they follow protocol, we can take the unconventional route." "We?" Amber repeated, unsure of what Emma was referring. "Cameron is missing, and she isn't the type to just run off. Something happened to her, and the longer it takes to find her, the less likely we will get to her before something bad happens." Ember nodded her agreement. "What can we do?" Emma glanced at Gabriel again, eyeing him up and down before continuing. "I'm going to school to be a private investigator. What better time to start than when there is a crisis? We start with the obvious. She was kidnapped." Amber's twin may have seemed like a simple teen, but she was highly intelligent. She saw things most people didn't, and was always looking out for Ember. Emma had a way of analyzing people for flaws and little ticks most people ignored. That was why she decided to be a PI. "You're right," Ember stated, looking back at Gabriel. "I think she was abducted too." "Wait. You told me the policemen thought she was abducted," Gabriel stated indignantly. "No, you asked what had happened, and I told you what I thought had happened," Ember answered irritably. "Well, the police are useless, so I'm taking over this case. The sheriff is already a suspect," Emma stated. Gabriel half smiled. "The sheriff?" Emma shrugged. "Sure. He's a suspect, you're a suspect, I'm a suspect." Emma raised an eyebrow at her twin. "You're a suspect?" "Everyone's a suspect," Emma stated before running to the ever-growing crowd. "Question is, who did it, and how?" Little things Ember forgot to mention. Her twin was also a little eccentric. Ember tuned everyone out as her mind tossed around the idea of a madman kidnapping her cousin. Every once in a while, her concentration was broken by a shouting officer or another police car pulling up to the yellow tape. How could a kidnapper grab Cameron without someone seeing? The man couldn't have just driven off with her. Then where would he have taken her? "The cameras," Ember stated, meeting Emma's eyes. She had been watching Gabriel fidget while standing next to Ember. He looked extremely uncomfortable. Emma knew what Ember meant the moment she met her honey brown gaze. "A car?" she asked. "The mechanics would see," Ember answered. Gabriel watched curiously as the sisters had a full conversation with their eyes. Emma nodded. "The trees." Ember glanced at the trees as they swayed to the melody of a breeze. She nodded. "The trees." Emma sighed. "You got 5 minutes." Ember's eyes widened as her twin sister took off towards the crowd. She knocked 2 officers over as her eyes scanned the people gathered in the edge of the caution tape. Emma ignored the shouts from their mom as she picked a big man in a muscle t-shirt out from the crowd. "You did it," she yelled at the top of her lungs while pointing at the gruff-looking man. "Did what?" He barely had time to ask before Emma was on top of him, her long arms and legs wrapped around the poor man's body in a death grip. "I got him, boys." The cops were on her in seconds. "I won't let go. I'm wearing him down." The poor man's face was squished against the teen's chest. He struggled to pry her off, but even the officers couldn't pry her off. She was causing a huge commotion that drew the eyes of all present. "Wait, Emma!" Ember looked back and forth between the chaos and the trees. Crap, she exclaimed. She dashed for the trees, not looking back. Gabriel glanced between Ember's retreating form and Emma's skinny one as she clung to the man and kicked at his friends who had joined the fight to remove her. Sheriff, he brought accomplices, Emma shouted. Gabriel was thoroughly confused by the girl's silent plan, but watched on as it unfolded before his eyes. The whole crowd had joined the fighting, it seemed. Some cheered and others tussled with anyone who got too close. The sheriff was shooting his gun in the air to get their attention, but the enthused Emma fought on. Gabriel smirked at Emma's insane plan, then back at the trees where Ember had disappeared. This was going to be interesting. That is the introductory chapter of my very first novel, The Great Thief, Dawn of a Guardian. If you like what you heard, please come visit me on Twitter at @thiefseries, or come and like my page and feel free to ask any questions at The Great Thief series. For now, I'm going to go ahead and log off. If you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. And of course, if you'd like to own your own copy of The Great Thief series, you can find it online at Amazon.com. It's in paperback and also in ebook. You can also find it at your favorite retailer like Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, etc. It was really awesome to share this piece with you, and I hope you all enjoy it. Thanks very much, and have a good night.